everyone, this is Shad Reis from NCVH 2023. I'm really privileged today to be with Dr. Yazan Khatib to talk about drug-eluting stents in femoral artery. Dr. Khatib, thanks for being with us. This is my first time being here, but this phenomenal focus on interventional, peripheral interventions.
Yes.
So tell us about the femoral artery interventions.
I mean, there's so many ways to treat the femoral artery, as you're aware, and it's a very complex vessel with its tortuosity, length of lesion, all that. I have been very early adopter of drug-eluting stent technology in the femoral artery. And the reason I'm a little bit biased to it is I was part of the initial trials that led to the first femoral drug-eluting stent approved, the Zilver PTX. So I witnessed firsthand. I still have patients who had their first implant 12 years ago that are still patent. I think that with drug-eluting stents, you get the benefit of a scaffold, which takes care of the recoil, which, as you know, as a cardiologist, is at least 30% of the restenotic process. And you have the drug, which also takes the hyperplastic phenomenon. And when you're treating 30 centimeter in real life worth of disease, there's going to be restenosis.
Yes.
But I think all in all, drug-eluting stents offer a very, very good option, both platforms, the Cook Medical and the Boston Scientific Rate.
So the concern always is a flexion point. This is always comes to mind, and the vascular surgeon usually kind of don't like that. It's a flexion point to put like a stent or a scaffold.
Yeah.
With a concern for restenosis or bending or cracking the stents.
So I mean, fracture. Early on, I'm old enough to remember those days. We talked a lot about fracture when atherectomy came around, and in reality, the real incidence of fracture remained low. And when you look at any of the long series, especially on the newer generation of stents, you know, the very first generation of nitrile stents were more rigid. We're talking about second or third generations, even excluding the Supera. They're much more flexible, and I would say data shows that there is not a single stent out there that's currently used in the SFA that has a 5% fracture rate at 5 years. Everything is in the 2 to 3%.
Right.
So that's a real concern, but it's low. I would say, you know, all those stents are approved in the proximal popliteal at the most distal part anyway. And so I think you should not extend them beyond that unless it's an older person who has limited mobility.
Right.
Fracture was very much related in a very early study to the activity level of the patient. And so you try and avoid, again, beyond P1 in young people, you should avoid stents unless then you put a Supera or a Viabond. Both of those have not had fracture issues.
Now, from your strategy, let's walk through the procedure itself very quick about sizing, length. Do you use imaging or no imaging? And in terms of discharge, same day or next day?
So I was an early adopter of outpatient cath lab as a business model. We had an outpatient cath lab since 2007. So for us, pretty much all our endovascular interventions are performed outpatient, unless the patient happens to be admitted to the hospital. So that's our de facto position. Our hospital admission rate from the outpatient lab is under 1% every quarter. We track it. So that's from a same-day discharge perspective. Sizing, it depends on what technology you're using. We were on the podium, and for the nitinol stents in general, you want to, except for the Supera, you want to oversize the stent in the femoral by 1 millimeter at least above the reference vessel. So if it's a 5 millimeter balloon dilation in the 5 millimeter vessel by IVUS, you're going to be putting a 6, if it's a 6 millimeter, putting a 7. That rule does not apply to covered stents. With covered stents, you size them as 1:1 because the edge restenosis becomes substantially higher when you oversize. And with Supera, you actually size 1:1 as well. And usually kind of dilate the vessel with a larger balloon to make sure Supera will deploy beautifully.
Because you're afraid to stack it up too much or stretch it too much.
Correct. And with quote-unquote overstacking, I don't think there is a real concern of increased restenosis. You just end up needing more stents to cover the same length segment. It's with understacking that you end up with higher incidence of restenosis.
So you favor more stacking than understacking?
When in doubt, overstack at the cost of putting one more stent as opposed to understack.
Okay, that's a good point.
Especially in heavily calcified areas. I mean, with the superiors, one thing that I find very helpful is to not go the whole throw. Usually, especially in heavily calcified segments, I go half a throw at a time. I feel I get more control that way.
Interesting. Well, thank you, Dr. Khatib, for your time. Really appreciate the input and the valuable tips for the femoral intervention. Please watch the videos and others on the NCVH YouTube channel. This is Shadi Reis from New Orleans. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.